don't normally start with an introduction, but I think you read my little bio in the thing. My name is Michelle Ruddell. I live just outside of Waco, Texas, and I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad you chose this session. I'm especially glad my friend Diane surprised me and her friend Michelle. They surprised me. I didn't know they were going to be here. So, all right. My son Matthew weighed 9 pounds and 4 ounces when he was born. He was 21 3/4 inches long. He was a big kid. And the first thing I thought when I saw this big bouncing baby was, we have ourselves a football player. It's Texas. That's what we do, right? By the time he was, I had hopes and dreams and plans for this kid, from Friday Night Lights to brown-eyed grandchildren. I had all kinds of hopes and dreams. By the time he was a year old, he weighed 34 pounds. It's a big kid. So he's going to be a lineman. Yeah, okay, we got that. By the time he started kindergarten, he loved to play t-ball. He loved to jump on the trampoline. He was a tough kid. He was always running and going and doing. He'd mastered his one-handed cartwheel. What he hadn't mastered was staying out of the principal's office. Most of our after-school conversations went kind of like this one from one day. Hey, Matthew, how was your day at school? It was good. Did you get your name on the board? They got their name on the board if they were in trouble. Yeah. Matthew, what happened? Me and Wade, we got water on the floor. Okay, I'll buy. Why'd you get water on the floor? Because we was washing the desk. Okay, why were you washing the desk? Because we colored on it. It's like, Matthew, you know better. Why in the world would you color on the desk? He goes, because we didn't have no paper. That was his way of thinking. But I thought, we can work on that. We can work on his behavior. We can work on this decision. By the way, he's 5. We can work on that decision making. Had all these plans and hopes and dreams. That starts with us when we're little. Do you remember your parents asking you, what are you going to be when you grow up? And your teachers asking you, what are you going to be when you grow up? And friends, neighbors, strangers on the street would stop you. What do you want to be when you grow up? My daughter, Valerie, when she was 3, she wanted to be a fire truck. And my 5-year-old corrected her. My 5-year-old daughter corrected her. No, you cannot be a fire truck. You can be a fireman. No, you can be a firewoman. And Valerie looked at her with every sibling rivalry on in her body and goes, no, I'm going to be a fire truck. Valerie's 27 today. I guarantee you she is not, or has she ever been, a fire truck. Sometimes our plans get interrupted. Our dreams take a detour. And sometimes our hopes come to a screeching halt. My budding future football star took his final breath in a mangled car on the side of an icy road out in West Texas, December the 5th, 1992. And we were shattered. What do we do now? What do we do when those hopes come to that screeching halt? Life is full of things that interrupt those plans, isn't it? If it's not a car wreck, maybe it's an illness, it's a diagnosis, it's a broken relationship. There's so many things. Jesus said in this world you will have trouble. And a lot of that trouble changes our plans forever. The day we had the wreck, I laid on the table in the emergency room. I'm still in the collar, laying on the backboard. They've come in. Here, sign this paper. We need to do this to your husband. We're trying to save his life. Here, sign this paper. We need to do this for your husband. We're trying to keep him alive. We don't know if he's going to make it. Here, sign this. We need to do this. We're still working, but his blood pressure's dropped so low, we don't know if we're going to be able to save him. Then my mom and dad come in, and they break the news to me that Matthew didn't make it. What I haven't told you is that I was 12 weeks pregnant. And I'm laying on that table, and I can't look anywhere but up. And, hey guys, come on in. I thought I'm going to lose my whole family in one fell swoop. Because how in the world am I going to be able to carry this baby with all of this trauma? And y'all, at that time, I had not been walking with the Lord. I had kind of run the other way, and then I was too ashamed, thought I couldn't come back because I'd messed up. You know, all those little Southern Baptists, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Guess what? But Psalm 31:9 says, be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. Now, I didn't quote that verse laying on that table. I just said, God, help me. And he did. He did. That baby that I was 12 weeks pregnant with will be 30 in May. And perfectly healthy. She's doing great. Have another daughter that was born after that. That's the one that wanted to be a fire truck. My husband spent 2.5 months in the hospital. Had some pretty major injuries. Had a long recovery. But he did live. That day was dark and desperate. How do we go on when our normal has been shattered? When everything around us has changed. If you've lost someone close, you know that surreal feeling of everything's come to a stop, but life around us keeps going. People around us keep going. And how do we do that? I had a neighbor look at me. It was my mom's neighbor, and she sat across the table from me. This had to be 2 or 3 days after Matthew's funeral. And she sat across the table from me, and she said, Michelle, you will never be happy again. And I thought, it made me angry. I was mad. How dare she say that to me? She knew that I just buried my son. She knew that my husband was in the hospital clinging to life. She had lost a son herself 15 years ago. Maybe that was part of the issue. But I got up from the table. I walked into the other room. I shut the door. I was like, God, don't let her words be true. Please don't let her words be true. And you know what? They weren't. Spoiler alert. Her words weren't true for me, and they don't have to be true for you. Even when we've gone through the hardest thing ever, losing a child. Her words don't have to be true. How do we keep going? When our life, everything stops at this point. I don't know. We seem like now I have a before the wreck life and an after the wreck life. You know, before this happened and after this happened. How do we move forward? You know, it was weird to go home and not to set 3 places at the table. My two girls were born after the wreck. It was weird to go home and set only 2 places at the table, but we had to eat, right? It was quiet in the car without that rowdy 5-year-old boy in the back, but I had to drive. My route to work was different. It made me sad not to go by the elementary school and drop him off or pick him up. But I had to go to work, get paid. The house didn't feel like home without him there. But that was where we lived, and the days just kept coming, right? So how do we go on? What do we do? How do we make sure that neighbor's words aren't true? First thing we got to do is ask God for help. Like I did on that emergency room table when I had no other choice. The Bible says he's near to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. And it's true. I think in times of that deepest, deepest sorrow, sometimes is when we feel his strength and his comfort the most. Because he is close to us. Psalm 46:1 says, he is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. So you've got to ask God for help. He is faithful. You got to allow yourself to grieve. When we suffer a loss like that, especially the loss of a child, well, it's not just loss of a child, but this session is for loss of a child. You got to allow yourself to grieve. A friend of mine told me, not long after Matthew died, she said, don't let anyone tell you how to grieve. She said, don't let anybody tell you, you got to be in this stage for this long, and this stage for this long, and this stage for this long. She said, everybody grieves individually. She said, you may go through all those stages in a week, and then you may circle back, but the key is to not get stuck. The key is to not get stuck in any of those stages. Each person grieves differently. What helped me when I was grieving may or may not have helped my husband or my mom or my dad. There were times when I wanted to talk about Matthew, and I wanted to tell Matthew stories, and I wanted us to, but my mom and my dad, we don't talk about it because that's going to make us sad. On the anniversary date, I want to talk to somebody. My mom and my dad, Now I've noticed that changing. My brother died a year and a half ago, and I've noticed that changing. But grieving is different for different people. You got to be patient with yourself. I noticed after Matthew died that those first few days and weeks, it felt like I was walking through mud. Every step, just to pick up one foot and put it in front of the other, was hard. It almost seemed like I had to even think and remind myself, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. You've got to be patient with yourself. That grief will sap your energy. I told my sister-in-law, she recently lost her daughter. And I said, you got to let other people help. I said, all your energy is going to be taken up with walking and breathing. Let somebody else take out the trash, do the dishes, let people bring you meals. You've got to let them help. Be gentle with yourself. Be patient with yourself. Things are going to take longer to get done. It's okay to cry. It's okay to rest. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to acknowledge and feel that grief. Some routines you're going to want to keep the same. Some routines you're going to want to change. Matthew's favorite restaurant, Long John Silver's. It was a whole long time before I could go eat there again. Some things we wanted to keep the same. Some things we wanted to change. A lot of times when there's a loss, there's anger involved. In our case, there was anger at the man who hit us at first. How could he? But he wasn't drunk. There was no alcohol, no drugs. It was icy road. He lost control, slid across. There wasn't anything he could have done. Wasn't anything. My husband was driving. There wasn't anything anybody could have done. It was just an accident. How do we deal with that? I could have been angry at my husband because I didn't want to go to Lubbock that day. But he goes, yeah, we need to go. But what good would that do? When we're grieving, y'all, we're in a fight for better over bitter. The preacher Matthew's funeral said these kind of things can make you better or bitter. And it's a battle. And some days it seems like bitter is winning. So what do we do? How do we make sure bitter doesn't win? Ask God for help. Be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself to grieve. Let other people help. Deal with the anger by forgiveness. Sometimes that's so hard. It's just so hard. It's not easy. It's not quick. And it's not a one and done thing. But that forgiveness gives freedom and it helps you let go of that anger. How do we do that? It's hard to be angry with somebody and pray for them at the same time. Maybe at first it's just, God help them, And then that prayer will change and you'll notice that your feelings begin to change. What else do we got to do? Do we have to do? That was bad English there. I am a math teacher. I'm not an English teacher. We have to look for the joy. We had our wreck in December of 92. In May of 93, my daughter Missy was born. So here we are, overjoyed. We have worried about this child the whole time because I was 12 weeks pregnant with her when we had the wreck. We have worried and worried and worried and here she is. 6 pounds, 7 ounces, healthy baby girl. It's okay. We didn't want her to play football, so it was okay. Healthy baby girl. We were overjoyed at that, but we were still grieving for the loss of Matthew. We lost him 5 months before. And I thought, this is really a strange feeling of that joy and sorrow coexisting. It happened again at Christmas. Because when Christmas of 93 rolled around, we were just over a year past the wreck. Not one of us wanted to put up a tree, decorate it, buy presents, wrap presents, cook food, celebrate. But here's this baby girl. And it's her first Christmas. And we can't let it be sad. So we put up a tree. It was a different tree. It was completely different than the other one we had. We wrapped presents. We cooked. She won't remember it, but we did. Joy and sorrow can coexist. The Bible says the joy of the Lord is our strength. How do we have the strength to function, to go on during this loss and not be stuck in bitter? It's by looking for that joy. To me, it was like a balance. When that wreck first happened, this grief is sharp and intense, and that pain is severe. But then you're going to hear that first little laugh's going to escape, because, y'all, there's some funny stuff in this world. And you might hear that little giggle, or it might even be a big old belly laugh. And you go, what was that? Let that first laugh surprise you, but don't let it make you feel guilty. Because experiencing joy doesn't mean you don't miss that person. Experiencing joy doesn't mean you're not sad. But there's a way that joy and sorrow can coexist. Pretty soon, maybe a good hour becomes a good day becomes a good week becomes a good month. They kind of balance out, and maybe then this joy overtakes, and this. But like that forgiveness, it's not a one and done deal. Anniversary date hits, what happens? Wow. So what do? We ask God for help. We look for the joy. Comes back up. What happens? Birthday hits. Wow. So it's a choice. Sometimes it's a battle. But we can have that joy alongside that sorrow. So we talked about asking God for help. We talked about allowing yourself to grieve. We talked about dealing with anger by forgiveness. We thought about looking for joy. One of the ways you look for joy is by practicing gratitude. Being thankful for what you have. 2 really dark times in my life that weren't around the wreck. One happened before, one happened after. And I had 2 different friends in those times that looked at me and they said, Michelle, you need to make a gratitude list. And the first one told me that, and I went, you know what's going on in my life? I don't have anything to be thankful for. My husband's in jail. My son and I have had to move back in with my mom and dad. She said, but Michelle, you have a roof over your head? Yeah. You got food on the table? Yeah. Your son is healthy? Yeah. She goes, I started your list for you. Go home and finish it. And I trusted her enough to do that, and it changed my attitude. There was another time 3 or 4 years after the wreck that I was done. I was single parenting 2 young girls. I lived 10 hours away from my parents. It was the anniversary of the wreck, and nobody remembered, and nobody said anything, and everybody I called was busy or out of pocket. I didn't have anybody to talk to. It was me and the 2 girls stuck at home, and I decided I'm done. Unfortunately, I used a phone, and I told my friend what was going on. She actually answered. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And she said, Michelle, I want you to write down everything bad that you're feeling, every hurt, every sorrow, everything that you think that's not fair. Write it all down. I'm like, I can do that. And then she said, the rest of the story, for every page of bad, you have to have a page of good. She goes, if you have 2 pages of bad, 2 pages of good. If you have 5 pages of bad, 5 pages of good. She goes, there's a lot of good going on in your life. You're just not seeing it. Write it down. She said, and have it on my desk at 8 o'clock in the morning. And y'all, it was midnight. But again, I trusted her because God has put good friends in my life that will drive 2 hours and surprise me on a Saturday morning. Yeah. Then we got to help others. 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4 talks about comforting others with the comfort we've been given. When God brings you through something, then you can help others. I've heard it said that your story is somebody else's survival guide. There were people that went through death of a child before me that I learned from. There are people that have gone through death of a child after me that I hope can see something in me that tells them it's going to be okay and you can be happy again. Another thing, I'm watching my time. They did give us a little more time here, so we're good. To watch for restoration. In Joel chapter 2, there's a verse that talks about, God says, I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten. If we're not careful, we'll miss those little bits of restoration. Those things that we think we missed out on, or things that we missed out on when we lost our child. We lived in a little town in West Texas when Matthew died. He was in kindergarten. As I watched his classmates go through milestones, it was hard. Because I kept thinking of what should be. He should be there with those kids. He should be there doing this. He should be there doing that. And as their senior year approached, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Because there's so much in that senior year. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Well, the summer before that, God did this whirlwind miracle thing, suddenly picked us up out of that town and moved us to Waco with a job over the telephone from a hospital, but it's a whole nother story. But he moved us to Waco, and I got a job teaching high school math, and I'm teaching these teenagers, and I'm loving it. And I'm going to their football games, and I'm cheering them on a Friday night, and it dawns on me, these seniors are my Matthew's age. Now I got 100 of them out there, you know. I felt like those are all my kids. And then several years later, we had a young man come to work at the high school that I taught at. And I thought, there's something about this young man. He's tall, he's dark-headed, he's really sweet, he's nice, he's good with the kids. They had a connection. Some of his family's related to some of my daughter Missy's really good friends. So there's a connection there. And we just kind of hit it off. And one night, like his second year there, we're at some school function, and one of the other teachers is giving him a hard time because he's young. And she goes, I got kids older than you. He goes, yeah, you probably do. She said, what year did you graduate from high school? And he said, 2005. And I went, that's the year my Matthew would have graduated. Got to watch. God gives us those little delights, those little glimpses, those little things that keep that joy. One more thing. I'm going to focus on hope. There's joy alongside our grief. There's joy alongside that sorrow. Hebrews 6:19 says we have this hope as an anchor for our soul. Because Jesus came and sacrificed himself for us, we have this hope, and it's an anchor. You think about an anchor on a boat. What happens when the waves come? That boat stays in the same place, right? What happens when the wind comes? I spent the night with a friend of mine last week, and she lives on the lake, and a storm blew in. And those waves just kicked up just all of a sudden, and the stuff on her deck is blowing all around. And I thought about this verse, when those storms of life hit, we have an anchor. We have an anchor. And if you don't know that anchor, grab one of us speakers and somebody and talk to them about it. We can introduce you. I have one more story for you. We're almost done. After Matthew died, we're living in Floydada. This is 3 or 4 years after the wreck. We're living in Floydada, Texas. It's out close to Lubbock. And I was giving driver's license tests for a living. So I'd given this lady her driving test, and it was uneventful. She passed. We pulled back up to the courthouse, and I'd given her results. We were about to get out of the car, and she turns and she looks at me and she said, you don't remember me, do you? And I cheated. I looked at my clipboard that had her name on it. It didn't help. I said, I'm really sorry. I don't remember you. Have we met? She said, I'm Wade's mom. You remember Wade? Wade was Matthew's buddy in kindergarten, his partner in crime. They dealt Miss Crawford misery. Wade's dad brought him to Matthew's funeral at 5 years old. And I remember thinking, wow. I'm not sure I would have done that, but I remembered Wade. I had not met his mom that I remember, but I remembered Wade. She said, let me tell you, the weekend you had the wreck was on a Saturday. She said, the weekend you had the wreck, Wade was out of town with his grandparents. We heard about the wreck. We heard that Matthew had died. But when Wade came home, it was late. It was his bedtime, and we didn't want to tell him right at bedtime. So we decided to wait till the next day. So when Wade gets up the next morning, his mom's telling the story. She said, he comes in and they said, Wade, we need to talk to you about Matthew. Matthew won't be at school anymore. And Wade goes, I know. And his mom's asking, what do you mean you know? He said, Matthew was in my room last night. He said he told me that he was in heaven and he wouldn't be at school anymore, but that we'd be friends when I get to heaven, we can play. And then he told me, Wade, always wear your seatbelt. And the mom says, Michelle, was Matthew wearing his seatbelt when you had the wreck? And I said, no, but nobody knew that but us. I always feel like I ought to put a disclaimer there. This was 1992. This was before everybody wore seatbelts in the back seat and rode in the car seats and all that. So, but anyway, Matthew told Wade, always wear your seatbelt. And his mom looks at me and she said, Michelle, Wade now has 3 younger brothers, and that car doesn't move out of the driveway without Wade checking on everybody to make sure they're buckled. And he says, because Matthew said, always wear your seatbelt. We have that hope. There's going to be a reunion, y'all. There's going to be a reunion, and it's going to be sweet. And we're going to see our little kids again, our big kids again, or we're going to be reunited with them, and it's going to be forever. The Bible says God's going to make all things new, and there's going to be no more sorrow, no more tears, no more pain, no more death. And when we see them again, we will never, ever have to tell them goodbye. And this time that we've been separated from them will seem like a blink. Until then, what do? Look for the joy. Fight for better over bitter. Remember that the joy of the Lord is our strength. Be gentle with yourself. Deal with that anger by forgiveness. Practice gratitude. Help others. And always wear your seatbelt. Do you know this chorus? Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because